Well, thank you for choosing track one, which is, of course, the topic of the day. And today that topic is procurement. So we'll be talking a lot about that. Remember, we do want you to interact with our speakers, but please do so using the chat function. We're moving on to chat now in the program rather than the Slido. So please do that. On Slido, however, there is a survey poll open that you can go to and fill out at any time, and we would love you to do that. Please do give us your thoughts. So, as I said, it's all about procurement today, and our first speaker is going to talk about the creation of a semantic base for European public procurement. Natalie Muric from the Publications Office of the European Union. Are you with us, Natalie? Great, there
yes,
you are.
I'm
Fantastic. I'm handing over to you. I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Okay, so I start sharing my screen. Voila. Okay, screen mode. Okay. Okay, so do you all have my screen now? Can you see my slides?
We can.
Okay, good. So I get started then. Okay, so I'm Natalie Muric from the Publications Office. I'm the coordinator of public procurement data within the office. I would like to start this afternoon on e-procurement by showing you the e-procurement ontology and the related reference data that we've set up in the Publications Office. I will show you the history, where we come from, what we've done, and where we're heading. So I hope this will be an enjoyable ride for you. Wait a minute, okay. So if I go back in history, we lived in a paper world. We had notices that were sent by paper, we had contracts sent by paper, requests for offers, orders, invoices, they were all sent by paper. There was no computers at this time. Everything was by paper. So everyone did everything in their own little world. It went along this line from notices to specification, contracts, requests, orders, and invoices. Okay, so this is what happened. And then we had the invention of the exchange of documents by electronic means, and we had the XML world that started up, but still people stayed in their own little worlds. They created notices in XML, contracts in XML, maybe orders and invoices in XML. However, they were, because they created in their own little worlds, there was a slight division. We had pre-award and post-award, and terms were slightly different in the pre-award and the post-award, and even within a post-award area or a pre-award area, some terms were not completely the same. I give a couple of examples here. They're not the most complicated, but it's just to give a general idea. In pre-award, we generally spoke about contracting authorities, and in the post-award, buyers. We've seen a move with the e-forms now that we have the term buyer as well in pre-award. The same for economic operator and seller. So we saw when we were working in the exchange of documents, for example, in SEMBII workshop of the Committee of European Standardization, we found there were some inconsistencies like this in terms. Now, why is this a problem? Well, it's not a problem in itself, but it's a good idea to have a good semantic base, because the e-procurement directives in 2014 saw the move to electronic procurement, where you would have services across Europe that could interact with one another. For them to be able to interact with one another, they all have to have a common understanding of the data that they're transmitting and receiving. So that's one reason to have a good base, the same notion of the same term, from planning to publication to evaluating, awarding, ordering, and invoicing. It also means that you can reuse the data. So once you've used the data once in your system, for example, In the notices, you can use the same information in ordering without having to retype everything. For example, the address of a buyer, for example, or a seller/economic operator. And once you have this common semantic base of terms and you create a relationship between all the terms and concepts, then you can start moving in the next evolutionary direction of linked open data. So having taken this all into consideration, within ESA Squared, there was an action 5.1 about European Public Procurement Interoperability Initiative, which was broadly made up of the Publications Office, DG Grow, and Digit. The Publications Office was responsible for the public procurement ontology, DG Grow for the ESPD and eCertis, which will also be linked to the ontology, and Digit are working on the BDTI pilot project, which will be discussed later, which reuses the ontology as a basis for the data that is exchanged. So let's now look at what the ontology actually is. As I've said, it gives a common information definition of concepts. It provides the relationships between them. So as you can see, you have the data in the center of this flower, and then it just goes out to all the different phases of e-procurement. Okay, and we build this first of all as a conceptual model. And this conceptual model is made, created, developed by a working group that meets every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Anyone interested in joining is more than welcome and can contact me. So they create a model showing all the relationships, what the terms mean, but this is only a model, so it does not actually give any use to a machine to transform the information from one place to another. So what we have also done in this project is we have created a script or several scripts that transforms this model that we have created into machine readable format. So we produce three types of files. There's the OWL, the shackle shapes, and the restrictions. I would also like to bring your attention to the point that this is really about the data and how the data relates to from one piece of data to another. It is not about the process that the buyer goes to a certain web service. No, it's about the buyer is responsible for a procedure, and the buyer, the information about the buyer is his address, who he is, and everything. In the ontology itself, it is not about content, so you won't actually find information about a specific buyer in the ontology. You will find the buyer, you will have a concept buyer, that it is an organization and that its address is this. It defines what information should be provided per buyer. However, it does allow for this data to be transformed into RDF. So you can put your data, you can associate it with the ontology to produce RDF that is machine readable format, okay? And we've actually done that with the TED notices, 5 years of TED notices. We took a sample of contract notice and contract award notice, and we have transformed them into RDF so that they can be linked amongst one another and the information retrieved. So just to show you briefly what the conceptual model looks like, you can see you have a procedure here. You have a document which is related to the procedure. And you have different types of documents. So you have tender documents, you have procurement documents. And in each case, you can find within the model the definition of the term. So you see, for example, a document has a dispatch date, it has an ID, okay? And you have a procurement document, for example, here. Now, it also has everything that is in a document, so you can give it a dispatch date and identifier. You don't need to replicate it in the procurement document, okay? And then, for example, you have tender specifications, which is a type of procurement document. So it can have all the attributes that are found in procurement document and in document. But it also has its own attributes like accessibility criteria, which is a code. And you will find in the conceptual model that code lists are shown in green, okay? They're shown in green because they are not actually transformed in the OWL files. We've left the OWL files open, but there are recommendations of what code lists should be used, okay? And as I said before, code lists have content in them. They produce the content, whereas the ontology itself does not produce content. So a bit more about the code list. We have two types of code lists that we represent in the ontology. They're code lists that are business agnostic, so they're not specific to e-procurement. Examples of these are countries, currencies, languages, etc. And they can be used in any phase of the e-procurement life cycle, or they can be used in other domains. Then we have the business domain specific code lists. Now, these code lists are ones that we've generally created for e-procurement, so they're to be used in e-procurement. However, they could be used in other domains if someone wanted to and found a use for them. I'll give you examples of business domain specific code lists. You have accelerated procedure justification and legal basis, for example. Now, you can find these e-procurement code lists. You can find them on EU vocabularies. We have a business collection where we list all the taxonomies and all the code lists used in e-procurement. This is actually a subset of a bigger set of code lists in EU vocabularies, where these are also included, showing all the code lists that the Publications Office makes available to everyone. Okay. So I come back to the BDTI project. I told you earlier on that we'd created 5 years of notices in RDF. So this is us here. We have created this. There's other national and regional procurement platforms that have also produced their data in RDF, and they have common semantics because they're all based and using the e-procurement ontology. And then the BDTI pilot project can either receive the information or go and get the information from different sources to look at the data, look at its quality, and to analyze the data. Now, the idea of this is that it shows the interconnection of public procurement systems that we can see in the future. It shows how we can move information around, the data quality, and the reusability. I won't go into this in any more detail because I know my colleague Cécile Guasch will go into this in a presentation later on. So that's where we are today. And now I come to the plan of where we are today, where we're going this year, and where we're going in the future. So I just run you a bit through this diagram. So we started off with the e-notification conceptual model. And from this, we used our transformation scripts to create the OWL, shackle shapes, and restrictions. So therefore, we had a formal ontology for e-notification. Then we produced the samples for TED in RDF, and they are being set up in a GraphDB for consultation. So this year, we plan to design a production TED semantic web service so that in the future we can have a TED semantic web service. At the same time, this year we plan to work on the conceptual model of e-access, e-ordering, and e-catalog. Once the conceptual model is created and agreed on by the working group, we will put it through the transformation scripts, and we will end up with a formal ontology for e-access, e-ordering, e-catalog, and of course, e-notification. It will all become one big thing. So then in the future, we will carry on and do other phases of the procurement life cycle. Now, in the future, these two elements will feed the European data space. So we can provide data for the European data space on the public procurement notices. And at the same time, the ontology is provided for other people working in the e-procurement area to provide their data also for the European data space. Now, the European data space, I don't want to go into this any further because Isabel Davosa from the Commission will be discussing this later. She will be talking about the public procurement data space, which is part of the European data space. So, having said that, that is the end of my presentation. I hope this gave you a clear view and sets the scene for the rest of the afternoon.
Hear me there?
Yes.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm just checking to see whether we have any questions for you, Natalie. I think it looks like you may have answered everything already. I don't want to ask you to repeat yourself. So yes, unfortunately, I think we've no questions for you, but if you stay with us, if they come in on the chat, I hope you will be able to respond to them by text. We have one now coming in, yes. Any possibility that the ontology project will have an effect on how future public procurement directives are semantically structured or written? The question should be seen in light of yesterday's presentation from eFinland on better rules. What have you got to say for that? I don't want to take advantage of you think if you haven't seen yesterday's, but any possibility that the ontology project will have an effect on how future public procurement directives are semantically structured?
Well, I didn't see the presentation yesterday, so unfortunately I can't comment on that. I think in brief, the answer to that is yes. I think in creating the ontology, we have seen where things maybe in the directive are not so clear or could be improved or whatever. But we work very closely with the commissioner, with Isabel, that's going to do the next presentation. So I think it will create a good basis for discussion, yes.
Okay, another question is, could you provide a hint of your plan on the mapping to the e-forms?
Okay, so I think the mapping to the e-forms will be completed during this year.
Okay, you're not going to give us any more clues, just that. Okay. Well, this was the case yesterday with the questions as well. People wanting to know what's coming next, needing a bit of security going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mapping will definitely be done by the end of the year. There will be draft mappings in between times.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation, and thank you to the audience for your questions. Reminder, please do keep sending in those questions using the chat function. We're not taking questions from Slido at this point, but just via chat. I also want to remind you that you can, however, use Slido to fill out the survey. You go there to slido.com, put in ENDORSE 2021 and select polls, where you will find a poll asking you to fill out so that we have some feedback from you over the 4 days. Now, I would like to remind you also, we do want you to keep sharing the data and the information on Twitter. Please use the hashtag ENDORSE2021. I also want you to follow the accounts on Twitter where you can see the tweets from EU Law Data Pubs, EU Publications, EU_Open Data, and EU Lex. So, with that, Natalie, thank you so much for your intervention. We're going to go on with the European vision for public procurement data. And joining us from the European Commission is Isabel Davosa. Isabel, are you there? Great, thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Yes, I am. I hope you can hear me well. I will start to share the screen for my presentation. I hope you can see it.
We can, it's good.
A little bit for the presentation mode. Yep, Okay, so indeed, my name is Isabel Davosa. I come from the unit B4 that deals with the data for policy making in DG Grow, and I've been working for the Commission already since 2016. The main purpose of this presentation today is to share with you the vision of the European public procurement data in the coming years. This presentation is very short and is organized in two main parts. The first to explain where we are, and the second part to explain where we want to go. And to start with, I always like to show this slide where we have a kind of state of play of the digitalization of the public procurement in the EU. So you can see in the top row the countries, on the left side we have two main areas. The first is about the phases of the life cycle, and the second one about some specific functionalities associated with public procurement. And you can see that the grid is using several colors, resulting from an assessment that we started to do in 2016. In dark gray, you can see the capabilities that were already existing when we started to do this assessment. And then in green, the capabilities that were gained since then. And you can see this is very positive. We have a lot of greens. The evolution is quite good. And in blue, you can see the capabilities that are currently being developed. I don't know if it is clear from this perspective, but I can tell you that we already have 9 countries with capabilities installed for covering the whole life cycle, or at least the main stages of the life cycle. It's important to say that this assessment doesn't mean that these capabilities in the member states cover the whole country. We have countries where the situation may differ a lot, especially those with the regional autonomy levels. And we don't have any information about the quality of the capabilities that are installed. But the level of digitization has increased a lot in the last years. One of the points I want to highlight here is only 4 of the stages of the life cycle have legal obligations, and here we are representing 8 stages. So there's a lot of work, even where there are no legal obligations. And in this slide, I just want to highlight some of the solutions that exist in the member states that are already in place and generating a lot of data. You have the contract registers that are usually central databases that gather data from different systems in one single point. You have the publication portals for publishing the notices. You have the public procurement platforms for the transactions of public procurement and much more, but this is just to give you one example of what is happening at the national level. At the European level, we have TAD. I think everybody knows TAD, one very famous tool in public procurement world. The numbers of TAD are quite impressive. As you can see in the slide, is a huge volume of information for public procurement. And the main point I want to tell you, this information is also available in open data format in the European Open Data Portal. And based on these, sorry, I just need to go back. Um, Based on these, on the level of digitization and the data that is starting to grow in the field of public procurement, in particular structured data, the Commission decided to dedicate special attention to the data management. And last year, we start to work on what we call the public procurement data strategy that is linked to the European data strategy that was published in the beginning of 2020. In our case, this strategy will be complemented by a public procurement data governance framework. And the main goal, or one of the centerpieces of the data strategy, will be the creation of the public procurement data space. These documents are not finalized yet. We are almost finalizing the data strategy and the high-level architecture of the public procurement data space, but I would like to share you one of the first views of what will be the public procurement data space. So basically, we are looking at the federated model where in a totally volunteer basis, member states can share the data sets that already exist at the national level. And from the side of or at least at European level, we have the TED data. And based on these, we are also investing in developing a new analytic tools that is able to read all the different data sets and have an integrated view in terms of analysis. We can also have data sets coming from third parties that are related with public procurement. And basically, the challenge here is how can we have an integrated view when those data sets, especially come from the member states, have so many different formats. One of the central pieces to have this integrated view will be the ontology that Natalie just described that enable us to translate and to interpret the different formats in one single way, I would say, uh, to be able to be analyzed by any analytic tools. Very important for us is that these analytic tools can also be used by representatives of the member states for them to avoid to develop their own solutions if they want. I mean, this is totally volunteer, and the decision will fall on the side of the member states. The reason and some the reason for this federated model and also the principles that are on the base of this vision are mainly four, and the ones that you can see in the slide. First of all, we are looking at a solution based on a collaborative approach. There are no plans to have so at least so far, any legal obligations to be part of this public procurement data space. It relies totally on the will of the member states to do so. Another thing is we are aware, as I already mentioned, that the formats of the data that is available can be very different. We don't want to pursue a direction where we are saying member states to change their formats. We want to find a solution where we can read and integrate different formats, and so basically a respect for the existing context in the member states. The solutions, as I was mentioned, to read these different data sets must be flexible. So we cannot find one single solution to do all these, but we are planning to look at methods that can be integrated and have different ways to read data in different formats, like the cases mentioned by Natalie, member states where already have linked the data, or others that are not so advanced but are still willing to send us the data or give us access direct to the data. The last point, very important to us, is about the fact this data or this solution or this vision is not based on the benefits from for our side. We are trying to design something that also represents benefits for the member states. And one of the important benefits from my point of view is only by having this broader vision of what is happening in the public procurement side, we are able to improve the current situation. And for the member states, this should be important as well, because it's one way for them to know where they are compared to others, also to understand what are the problems that exist in other countries, and to think how they can improve these either from the technical side or either from the legal side. Just to say, to finalize this presentation, that um, we are convinced that this public procurement data space will be the foundation to have a more comprehensive view of public procurement in the EU. But above all, this will be a very important tool that will enable us to have a better governance of public procurement. And this is all from my side.
Thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Let me just check now whether we have, I know we're running a little ahead of schedule. Do we have questions from our audience? Just checking if there's any coming through. I think not. I think, Isabel, you've actually answered everything. It's been a very concise and clear presentation. So nobody's coming into me with anything that needs any additional clarification. So just tell us then, what's the final thought you want to leave our audience with?
Although the final thought about this data space, which is a very dear project to our heart, I must say, it looks very simple when we speak about federated models and collaborative approach, and everybody that will participate if they wish. Seems very, very simple, very naive. Probably it is, but is a very complex solution and requires a lot of investment for all the parts, not only from the Commission that is designing the architecture and investing in the infrastructures, but also for the member states. And I'm totally convinced, because I work in Portugal for 15 years in public procurement, that it's very important that you invest in your own country, but with this view of where you are compared with others. You cannot improve yourself without understanding what is happening in the rest of the world, and especially with those that are near you. That is the case of the European countries. I'm a strong believer that this will bring benefits for everybody.
Thank you, making the case for collaboration very strongly there. So let us move on. The next point in our agenda is going to be towards a comprehensive EU data strategy for e-procurement, something that I know is very much top of mind at the moment. A reminder to everyone, again, you will get tired of me saying this, but please do fill out our survey. We're asking you about best practices and so on. Take a little bit of time. You can go and find that on slido.com and put in the ENDORSE 2021 hashtag to get there. And also, once again, please keep sharing online, on social media. We are keeping an eye on what's being said online, as well as what's being said in the chat. But do keep your questions coming. And your next questions will be to Roberto Reale from Eutopian, who is going to tell us about that e-procurement.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. It will be very hard for me to talk after Isabel, which I know very, very well. She's a great expert on procurement and, generally speaking, on the data strategy. But I am here today as the president and founder of Eutopian, which is a non-profit organization based in Rome. We have as our purpose, as our goal, the promotion of innovation, and we are acting as a trade union between the public administration and SMEs and the citizens as well. So I share my presentation. Let me share it now. Okay, there we go. Okay, so let's start. Just a couple of minutes to describe the point where we stand now. So we have been working on the e-procurement strategy for years now. There have been a lot of projects, starting from the directives, of course, and then going on through paper, for example, the SMBAI workshops, the ESPD, the e-forms, which will be mandatory in 2 years now, ECRTs, and so on. And there is a foundational layer, which is the European Interoperability Framework, the IF, which is, in my opinion, the very foundation for every data initiative in the EU. So this is just to say where we stand, and the European Commission has put forth a lot of effort. There is this beautiful book which is available on the website of the Publications Office about what has been done, and about also which are the directions in which we will move. But why semantic interoperability is so important when it comes to e-procurement? In my opinion, there are three main reasons. First of all, economic growth. Why so? Because semantic interoperability is the best way to enable an efficient data interchange between all the stakeholders. And as the president of the European Commission told us at the last State of the Union, we need to leverage what she called industrial data, but she means data different from personal data, so e-procurement data as well, in order to foster economic growth in the EU. To some amount, we lost our probably our battle as far as personal data is concerned. So it's even more important to focus on industrial data and on procurement data. So this is the first reason why semantic interoperability for e-procurement is so important. Then semantic interoperability also allows data-driven policies, and that's why the European Commission, but the EU institutions in general are insisting that much on interoperability, because it's pivotal. It's pivotal to be able to make decisions and to assess the impact of these decisions. And what I perceive today, as far as e-procurement is concerned, the part of e-procurement that is formalized today is too narrow. We need to add additional layers. We need to add resource planning. We need to add impact analysis, monitoring, innovation procurement. Here there's a typo, but I mean monitoring is is present twice, but that's probably because monitoring is so important. These parts are usually not included in what we mean by e-procurement today, because we have formalities in place for a limited set of the pre-award phases and a limited set of post-award phases. So we need to expand the e-procurement reach well beyond what is available today. Then there is the public-private competition. I call it competition, not just cooperation. Why? Because in my opinion, the public bodies, the government, the EU institutions at every level should be able to transfer to economic operators some of the burden of managing services based on a clear interface. So even in that case, semantic interoperability is the basic is the basic condition for the public sector to transfer some of the burden of providing services. And as part of this shift, of this paradigm shift, we also need probably to change, in part, what the technological layer we use. We have today the DSI as the foundational technological layer for data interchange, but we need to complement it with more modern protocols. Just an example, the GraphQL is a protocol that allows the client to ask from the server, from the data provider, exactly the data portion it needs, and this is a way for to obtain, a more sustainable, data mechanism on as far as the data provider is concerned. So, just to summarize this part, we do have three main reasons for data interoperability in the e-procurement sector: economic growth, data-driven policies, and public-private competition. Then we come to the second part of my presentation. Very quickly, 5 ideas for a comprehensive strategy. First idea: we need to distribute the effort of ontology design. Why? Because design and procurement ontology, which is what the publications office is doing today, is a huge task, and they are extremely good at that. I am also part of the task force, not with Eutopian, but with but anyway, it's a huge effort, and there is also a huge risk of the stakeholders not adopting, not buying in the ontology. And in order to control this risk, in order to reduce it, in my opinion, what we need to do is to ask at least the relevant stakeholders in the member states to join in, to chime in, and to participate in an active way in the development of the ontology. Also, the ontology should be developed. It's the way it's developed today, which is quite good. In a way, it's could be improved because, for example, GitHub, which is used just as a code repository, could become the main technological asset in order for all stakeholders to collaborate. Exactly as today we know that open source projects, large open source projects, are doing. So this is what the first idea. Second idea, that thinking of the data strategies as code. So using, for example, the DevOps paradigm. Why that? Because, for example, in the change management of the ontology of, for that matter, of every data initiative, one of the main problems is that when I do change the ontology, I risk disrupting the interoperability between systems, because not all systems are able to adapt to the ontology change. So using DevOps, which means using automatic rules for cascading changes from the ontology to implementations, could be to overcome this problem. The DevOps paradigm, for example, is in running checks approving a change, and that without human intervention. So this is something that industry and some, in my opinion, also e-procurement ontology. So digital sustainability. Why? Of course, there is a digital sustainability. There are indicators, there are metrics for green procurement, but this is not the only way in which we should talk about digital sustainability, because the e-procurement infrastructure itself has a carbon footprint, and we should reduce this footprint because on a large scale, on a EU-wide scale, it matters. It becomes noticeable. So in order to do that, we should embed some, for example, some predicates or attributes, or we could even develop dedicated vocabularies to describe the environmental cost of the digital assets which are parts of the e-procurement architecture. So I'm not talking here, just to be clear, I'm not talking here about green procurement. I'm talking here about the carbon footprint of the e-procurement architecture at the EU scale. So, yeah, going faster, leveraging the blockchain and DLT technologies. There is, as you know, important, it's probably the main initiative in Europe, the EBSI, which is now developing national nodes. And if we want to connect the e-procurement architecture with the EBSI, we could use these nodes, these national nodes, and we could also try to improve the direction in which the development of the EBSI is going. There are few use cases. This is not a comprehensive list. It's just to begin. But for example, we could use blockchain to store certificates to store, for example, to distribute identity and access management. What do I mean with that? For example, if an economic operator wants to access data which is provided by another stakeholder and is not free of charge, or it is free of charge, but it's only it's only provided with a limited access, while the credentials could be managed through the blockchain. There is, for example, the SSI initiative throughout the EU, which is a way of managing digital identities in a distributed fashion. Last idea, liaising with the Gaia-X cloud. Gaia-X, as you know, is not a traditional cloud. It's more of a strategy. And in that sense, it's the ideal place in which we can store and operate data objects related to e-procurement. And what is interesting in the Gaia-X project, in my opinion, is that there are other data sets or data spaces which are proximal, which are close to the e-procurement one. For example, the company registers, the public expenditure data, public works, constructions, intellectual property, and so on and so forth. A lot of relevant data spaces which are not e-procurement proper, but can be used, can be linked by or referenced by e-procurement data space. So this is the fifth and last ingredient in what I believe could be a comprehensive strategy for e-procurement data. What is important is to involve all the stakeholders, not just the top-down approach which has been followed till now, which is I repeat, is quite good. It could be complemented with a collaboration approach, with a bottom-up or collaborative approach. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I think we had a couple of technical pauses, but I think you got your message strongly across. It was good to hear that principles. Let me check if we have any questions from our audience. I believe we have got, no, we have not got a new message. We are absolutely nailing it with these presentations. I think you're answering all the questions before they even come up. So thank you very much, Roberto, for your presentation.
Thank you.
We'll turn now to our next speakers, who will be discussing putting in place an e-procurement BDTI pilot. From the European Commission, we will be joined by Sander van Dooren and Cécile Guasch. Now, for this particular panel, we will allow you to, if you want to, only if you want to, switch on your mic and your camera and ask the questions in person. So Cécile and Sander will be keeping an eye on whether you raise your hand in the platform, and you can do that. But of course, if you prefer to maintain your data protection and your privacy, you can, of course, just ask the question in the chat function as well. So keep an eye out and beware that you can do that. Cécile? Thank you very much. We see you. You're ready to go. I'm just explaining to the audience that if they want to switch on their mic and cameras, you guys are happy to take those questions from them. So I will leave it over to you to present your session.
So, hello. Thank you for participating to this session. So, my name is Cécile Guasch, and I'm working with Sander van Dooren in Digit Unit D2, Interoperability Unit. And we are very glad that we could start this project that was based on the impetus of the agency AGID, the agency Digitale Italy agency, something like that. So we will explain to you in the next slide. So maybe Sander, you would like to introduce yourself first, and then we go to the content.
Yep, sure. So where Cécile is well an expert on a great many of things. She's more the expert on the domain. My expertise is more in the technical implementation of things, and so I'm more involved in putting into place the technical components for this pilot. But we, as Cécile mentioned, we both work at DGT2.
Yes, and for me, it was really reassuring to have Sander, who is the technical architect of the join-up platform, so together in this project, because he comes with a hell of technical experience. So what we will address in this session, these points. So first, what is the aim of this pilot? Who are the main stakeholders? Which are the main components identified so far? The timeline, because the pilot is not yet over. Which were our initial findings, and we have cooked for you some questions at the end, and we hope we will have some time for the questions we ask you, and I hope we will get from you some questions as well. So let's start into the topic. So what is the aim of this pilot? In fact, you had some information from Isabel Davosa about their work towards the European Public Procurement data space. And in fact, what we want to do in this pilot is to pave the way to this public procurement data space. Because in fact, from historical reasons, we got to start I think a bit earlier than they started. And so it is a very interesting thing to have this experimental approach where that can feed the policy directly, so with fresh and accurate information. So how do we want to do that? In fact, we also wanted to make the reuse of the e-procurement ontology that was created or is still in the making, but for which we have already quite a substantial set of information elements. So we wanted to make use of this and maybe, well, I will let Sander explain a bit more, but so we make use of this e-procurement ontology with the creation of linked open data, and then see how this can be used in the analytics world. And for that, we want to construct everything using open standard and open sources for the purpose of being reusable. And Sander, could you explain our ambition in this reusability?
Yes, yes, yes. Well, I think it's actually it's very nice to be able to present to after Roberto, because now I can refer to his presentation. Um, what he beautifully laid out was this idea of applying DevOps to the data space. And this is actually what we are trying to do is to really have everything in one repository and use this to declare how the data will flow from the data sources to the output data catalog. And in fact, we try to reuse as much as possible open source software. And I don't think at this point, we don't rely on anything proprietary anymore. So that we use a Dockerized setup so that the complete environment is reproducible for whoever wants to later on reuse aspects of this pilot in future projects.
Yes, and you will explain to us a bit more when we talk about the components. But just to mention that this is fully in line with what Isabel mentioned earlier on, that indeed we want this work to be in hands of the member states, in hands of businesses, in hands of anyone who wants to take part in the public procurement data or public procurement activities. And so also, how did we start this work? In fact, we were very honored and happy to have information from the e-procurement expert group. So an expert group that is organized by DG Grow, and where member states can channel their input and information. And from this, we really we started this pilot, taking into due considerations all the high-level requirements that were expressed by this community. And so we have to pay tribute, I don't know if it's a right expression, but to really give them this, that they drove our approach nicely. And I will just mention, show to you little things about this approach. So in fact, we came with, as we want to start with having also a holistic approach and encompassing all the aspects that are important for the public procurement data strategy. We relied upon the strategic objectives that were set out by this community. And there are, he explained here, so from competition, transparency, support SMEs, and strategic procurement that involves social, environmental, and innovation. Of course, we cannot address everything, and it's the word pilot means that we are really limiting. We want more to test architectural aspects in this pilot. So we focused on the limited domain of competition, and even with a very small subset here with one use case. So, but this is our starting point. So driven by the business, in fact. And then we also worked a lot on identifying how the strategic principles that were set out by the community, the EXAP analytics subgroup. So just to slight information on this. So they wanted to follow a risk-based approach, and we had identified that the reputational risk was high, because it happens quite frequently that an entity consuming public procurement data comes with some results which are contradicting with another entity consuming public procurement data, and that that people so don't agree with the results because of reasons that we want to avoid in this approach. Then they also pushed for a holistic approach, meaning that from the data provisioning or acquisition to the data consumption, and that things would be, so it was a nice expression saying 360 degrees approach, meaning involving all the actors. And for this, for instance, what we did was to involve all the levels of public administration in our pilot to make sure we would be able to address, to make sure that the architecture would be able to address such a point of view. Then using linked open data also was supporting from the consumption aspect this principle. And then they stressed the need for the quality approach. And for that, it's also part of our pilot to consider the quality of the data that is used together with the usage of this data. So, and then who are the main stakeholders? So I already mentioned the important role that AGIT play because they set out a request to the ISA Square program, and that was considered as very, very interesting. And so we created a project on this basis. And part of this project are AGIT members, CONSIP, who is this local administrative level in Italy, so a public administration making procurement. ANAC, who is the contract register holder in Italy. IMPIC, who is the contract register holder in Portugal. The publication office, who deals with all the notices above thresholds, and Digit. And in Digit, in fact, it's not a very simple thing because we are, in fact, there is Digit D2, Sander and myself belong to this unit, but also the people dealing with the CEF BDTI infrastructure that we are reusing in the context of this pilot, which is maybe I will then later let Sander give a bit of a more explanation on this. And also Digit, so D1, so the data service unit, who is also collaborating in order to provide a sound solution for data data management, let's say. So next is about the components. So I will let Sander explain this part, please.
No, maybe just the last thing about the previous slide to mention what types of data sources that we have, and I think it's easier if you could just skip back to the previous slide, then to give so yes, because we have a variety of data sources in this pilot. For instance, Concept provides us with direct access to Sparkle endpoint that is already consistent with the e-procurement ontology. ANAC provides us with CSV files that are then transformed within the BDTI infrastructure. From Portugal, we have JSON files that are consistent with the OCDS specification. And then, of course, we have the publication office with the eForms data. Just to give you an overview of the types of data that we're actually consuming in this pilot. Now, looking at this slide, there are two concepts that we lay over all of even on top of this slide, you could say. And that is on the left, we have a collection of data sources, and those we represent in a data catalog of the input data sources. On the right side, we end up with data in our output data catalog, where all the data is then represented consistent with the e-procurement ontology. Now, within the, of course, to go from the input to the output catalog, we need to execute transformations. In order to do that, we make use of RML which is a mapping language to map relational or any other type of data source to RDF data. And so there, the output of this transformation is then stored in our triple store in case of data sources where we have to do a transformation. But of course, in case of Concip, for instance, we simply keep a reference in our output data catalog towards their Sparkle endpoint, and we don't record any, we don't keep any data on our own. So that's why we talk about a virtual data space. Not everything is physically located in the pilot, but sometimes, well, for some data sources, it's just a reference. Transformation is one thing, but of course we want to be able to improve over time our mappings, and that's why we do validation of the data sources. And we try to represent all these data quality output that we captured during the transformation process. We also bring it as part of the knowledge graph that represents also the input and the output catalog. So we use DCAT to represent the data catalogs, but also all the data quality gets recorded in a similar way.
Sander, maybe there is something, yes, that we did not mention, is that we use also the provenance ontology to keep the lineage between the input and output.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. I have to speed up a bit.
Yes.
And then once we have everything in our virtual data space, we use a BI tool, also open source, that is called Apache Superset. And in order to use this, because this BI tool is not used to connect to a Sparkle endpoint, so there we have to rationalize it. We execute a Sparkle query and then ingest this data into a tabular format. That's just an intermediate step we have to take.
Well, we move forward. So, in fact, what Sander just explained is this technological stack change that we discovered not so long ago, because before we were trying to use the KNIME platform, and this led to make our life more complicated than it was, and as well because KNIME was not fully open source, then we have this move, and that's why we had a shift in this in the planning, and the planning is now the updated planning taking into account this. So we have, just to show you that we progress, but we are still in the making, and I will go faster to the next points. The initial findings, and we have understood the high importance of data governance. And for instance, and I will go fast, that in the mapping to the ontology, so there is this very practical thing of knowing, okay, I have from my input source this information, what do I get in my output, how can I map with the ontology? The involvement of the data owners is crucial and leads to really better quality information. And then maybe Sander go, but fast to the other points.
Yes, so the importance of data catalogs. Well, we started out with a bit of a different approach, let's say, but then we found that really representing the input and output data sources as logical entities in our pilot brought a lot of benefit. So data catalogs are really the way to go.
Then we also saw that to make sure that the conformance to have a good quality data, then we need the right set of rules, and this is still ongoing work. So we reuse the rules that are provided by the eProcurement ontology, but we see that there must be more added to make sure that we have good quality.
I see that you're coming to the end of this slide, but we really need to wrap it up now because we've gone over time. There you go. That's your final questions.
Yes, so please, people in the room, could you please express whether you would see this case as a reusable solution for you in your context, and then do you see a value in establishing a quality feedback for the data consumer to the data owner, as we will implement these validation reports that are available for the data consumer.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. A bit of homework there for our audience as well to give you feedback. Thank you both very much, Cécile and Sander, for that introduction to the work you're doing. We're going to turn now to Juremy's legal term search, and Timea and Robin Palotai. Are you there? Can we see? There we go. Great. Thank you both very much. Over to you now for your short 10-minute presentation. I'm afraid you're on mute. No, we still can't hear you. We can see you, but there's no sound.
Hi guys. Hi guys, sorry about that. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Great. Super. So, welcome everyone. We would like to present our terminology search to a Juremy. We prepared a slide so we can show you. Great. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see them now. Great.
Great. Is it visible? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's get started. My name is Timea. I'm a Hungarian attorney and a lawyer linguist. And I used to work for the European Court of Justice. Can you see your slides now?
Yes, I think now it's a bit better. It disappeared for a second, but we've got it back.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry about that. So actually, I was working in French and English into Hungarian, and I used to use a lot of EURLEX data for referencing and translation.
Sorry, guys, to interrupt you again. Could you turn off presentation mode? Apparently, it's interfering with the tech here.
Okay. So we can just press escape, maybe. Better now?
No, I'm afraid I'm being told by the team it's not working quite well at the moment.
Okay, Timea, do you remember today when you launched the presentation, and then on the top of the presentation you had to change the setting? So you launched your presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. No.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
There we go. Fantastic. You're going to have to go double fast now to get through it, but well done.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So, based on my experience as a lawyer linguist, we developed the search tool, Juremy, which operates on the EURLEX database and the IATA, which makes it faster to find corresponding translation for phrases or parts of text in the source document, because it's really important for legal and EU institutional translators to provide consistency with preceding EU texts. And sometimes this terminology research can take up a lot of time of translators. Yep. There are various tools and resources available online, so you might be familiar with them, each with their own benefits and trade-offs. So this is a screenshot of Juremy. This is how it works. If if we have some minutes left, we may be able to demonstrate it. Now we just show that we display the source text and the target text in 2 columns. And you are able to choose any of the 24 languages. So you can have any combination of the EU language pairs. And with the aid of the filtering on the left side, you can customize your search according to source of law or court. And lately we integrated IATES. So if the search term has a match in the IATE database, it also shows it, and then it shows a link to the IATE ENDORSE website.
Yeah, and our ultimate motivation is to reduce the repetitive manual tasks. So, for example, that's why we added the smart search. So when you're looking for an exact match and you don't get any, then usually you go and delete or alter the search phrase until you get a match. But with Juremy, it will automatically perform some kind of fuzzy lookups for you, or matching only on the stamped phrase, or various other matches that will give you a result without having to refine your request continuously. And how it can do that, we download the open data accessible EULEX corpus, and then we pre-process the data for fast searching. And well, we have a serving layer on top of this, the UI, which you could see.
And here is a small comparison. So translators and interpreters, when they have to work with EU-related text, they can turn to corpuses like IATE or DGTTM. And here we compared our database or Juremy with this. And here you can see that the database which our tool uses is at the moment is select sectors number 1, 3, 5, and 6, which are the most commonly used resources for EU translators, treaties, legal acts, preparatory documents, and the EU case law.
Yeah. And we are continuously improving our tool based on user feedback. So recently we have improved the iGuide. So you spend less time on searching for the context, and we have other domain-specific features as well that are useful for legal translators. Yeah.
This is just a list of features in Juremy which are also used for not only for translators but for lawyers as well. So you can search for a case number in these select sectors, and you can find the bilingual corresponding segments in the text. Or if you are interested in a case law in a given subject, you can just enter a term, and you will see listed all those documents which contain this phrase, and you can sort it according to relevancy or date as well. And we are also displaying Eurovoc topics, but it's not yet possible to filter on them. It could be a next step, so it's a future development idea.
Yeah. So I guess it's that in a nutshell. Feel free to try juremy.com. It's available after a registration. And if you have any questions, then yeah, I don't know if you have a minute. If you don't, then you can find us via email or the conference application.
Thank you both very much indeed. We do actually have a couple of quick questions. Can you change the order of the hit list? What are the parameters?
Sorry, the order of?
Can you change the order of the hit list? What are the parameters?
You mean switching the source and target language, for example?
Well, we have also a question on languages as well. Are there any plans to have a multilingual display as in Eurolex?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I think that was a recently asked feature. Sometimes interpreters especially would like to see 3 or even up to 5 variants if available. So that's possible in the future, although for start we'll concentrate on CAT tool integration. And yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to turn now to our next presentation towards semantic interdisciplinarity by linking diverse scientific knowledge graphs. And here to present that, we have Panagiotis-Marios Filippidis and Charalampos, Bratsas and Evangelos Chondrokostas from the University of Thessaloniki. Thank you very much. Can we get you there on screen? Hello, can you see?
Can you see the slide?
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are. Fantastic. Okay. Over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon from Greece. My name is Charalampos Bratsas. I'm a faculty member of Department of Mathematics of Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and also founder of Greek chapter of Open Knowledge Foundation. So together with my partners Notis Filippidis and Evangelos Chondrokostas, we are who are also in Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and Open Knowledge Foundation Greece. We are happy to participate in ENDORSE conference and present you our latest work regarding scientific knowledge graph and semantic interdisciplinary. Our main idea is to link diverse scientific knowledge graphs and combine the knowledge from various scientific fields in order to enable semantic interdisciplinarity using unified knowledge graph for all research areas. Our work has been supported by PhD Hub Erasmus Plus program of European Union, and we apply the results in European PhD Hub that continues to operate and host many universities across Europe, even after the project time life. Our work is based on scientific classification, which are a valuable tool to group concepts of the same or related research areas into a common hierarchy. They facilitate an indexing of scientific work, such as books, papers, and variety publications, and they also provide higher education institutes, academia, and researchers concepts that describes their work. We have already done an extended research about scientific classification from international institutes and authorities, and we categorize them in two broad categories. The specific scientific classification that are more detailed about specific scientific domain like mathematics, medicine, physics, economics, literature, etc. And the generic classifications that have wider scope, but usually lack in terms of details. Some of the most common examples are UNESCO fields of science and technology and international standard classification of education fields or fields of education and training. Our idea is to combine the advantages of each category, namely of scope of the generic classification with a level of detail of the specific classification into a unified knowledge graph. For example, this knowledge graph can be used for semantic enhancement of scientific content with multiple concepts of heterogeneous classifications, even if that content may be initially considered irrelevant to the domain of these classifications. As I said, we made a survey about the most common and complete classifications from official authorities, and we transformed in RDF format using the SCOS vocabulary. In addition, in order to have a common semantic representation for all. We use URI prefix for PSD Hub project, based on which all classifications were transformed. We use ETL tools for these tasks, such as linked pipes ETL. And in some cases, we had also to perform cleaning and filtering tasks to have a valid RDF representations of these classifications. So we create a total 12 scientific classification drafts from respective classifications. And in this picture, you can see the ISCEP classification. And we display in different colors the concepts in a hierarchy structure.
Now, in this slide, you can see all the scientific classifications we've used. The blue color indicates a generic classification, while a green one indicates a specific classification. The generic classifications that were used was the ISCEP Fields of Education and Training, UNESCO's Fields of Science and Technology, the Joint Academic Coding System, the Springer subject, the classification of fields of the education and training, and the fields of science and technology. For the specific classifications, we used the mathematics subject classification, the Asian computing classification system, the physics and astronomy classification scheme, the unified astronomy thesaurus, the STW thesaurus for economics, and the Journal of Economic Literature classification system. We transformed and stored all these graphs into the same triple store, enriching our knowledge graph, and then we started creating links between them. For the linking project, we used the alignment tool and the SILK framework, whose functionality has been integrated into alignment in order to provide the configuration of the similarity algorithm between a pair of classifications. The chosen algorithm configuration uses a natural language processing pipeline to compute a similarity score for every possible link between the concepts of two classifications, based on the comparison of their labels. The ones with a higher score are presented as suggestions to the alignment user. Then the user decides which concepts correspond to which relation, if there are any, defining the appropriate link between them. To make this choice, we also consider the hierarchy level of each concept in their respective classifications, as presented in the tree view of the alignment tool, in order to decide whether an associative or hierarchical relation is the most suitable for that link. For now, we have made links between the UNESCO classification, which is the core classification of the knowledge graph, and four other classifications, namely the generic International Standard Classification of Education and the Joint Academic Coding System, as well as the specific Mathematics Subject Classification and the SCM Computer Classification System. We've used various cost properties to describe the type of relations between the concepts, and specifically we've used the exact match property for mappings between very similar or identical concepts that can be used interchangeably. The narrow match and broad match properties for hierarchical mappings, the related match property for associative mappings, and the close match property for mappings between sufficiently similar but not totally the same concepts. One concept can be linked with several other concepts from another classification, depending on what kind of relationship they might have. We have created about 2,500 links in total, which have been verified by domain experts in academia, using the voting system that is available in the alignment tool.
Now, the diagram in this slide presents a simple example of linking concepts between the knowledge graph classifications. All concepts in the example refer to the term statistics that exists as within all these classifications. This concept, statistics, of the UNESCO classification in the middle, is linked here with the score's exact match relation, each concept of the other classifications that has the same label. This concept may exist in different hierarchical level in each classification. So it makes sense that statistics are a broader category in the mathematics classification, while it can be found in narrower levels in generic classifications such as UNESCO. With this link, the statistics concept of the UNESCO classification can relate to all narrower concepts of the statistics term of the math classification, accessing and leveraging all relevant information. Respectively, the statistics concept of the math classification relates to broader concepts of the statistics concept of UNESCO, which are possible to refer to different scientific fields. These kinds of connections have been created for all these pairs of classifications, as seen in that picture. Now, regarding the implications, we have used this unified knowledge graph to enhance the content of the PhD hub, such as PhD offers of universities and calls for cooperation of companies, multiple concepts from various classifications. To this end, we have built a semantic engine that analyzes the offer text description and enhances it semantically with knowledge graph concepts, applying similarity measures. These concepts are stored as semantic annotations for each offer, including also order links that have been previously created. This way, the offer is indexed with concepts of numerous classifications, which in turn can be used for search. For example, if the term statistics is not directly referred to the body of a text of an offer, the user query with this term will retrieve the offer if it has been annotated with that term, and this also stands for all related concepts, as defined by the created links. For example, mathematics as a broader concept of the term statistics. We have applied the semantic enhancement dozens of PhD offers and calls of cooperation in the European PhD Hub, while the latter can also be connected to researchers with similar scientific fields of interest. Both knowledge graph and the semantic engine can be integrated into other platforms, applying the same semantic enhancement and search features to their own science-related content. Another application we have thought of is an interdisciplinary tagging system of journals, enabling advanced indexing in search of scientific publications. We aim to apply this semantic enhancement in journals' research areas tags, provide more and complementary concepts that may correspond to the journal's content. We believe that this will facilitate the search of the journal's content through scientific publications repositories, but also the related work suggestions to academia researchers. Beside tags, semantic enhancement can also be applied to the body of the publication, for example, the abstract, to identify more concepts that may relate to the content, enrich its scientific fields annotations, and benefit even more its own search, but also the identification of related works. Finally, graph analysis features are another aspect that provide valuable insights about the similarity and the relevance of the diverse scientific fields and their subcategories, and could also be integrated in the whole procedure, allowing better results through statistical concepts modeling.
So thank you for your attention. That's all for us, and we're glad to answer your questions and discuss a little bit your ideas about semantic interdisciplinarity. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do indeed have a question for you. What is the coverage of individual member states in PhD Hub? Are entities from all EU member states present among offers and seekers?
What is? Can you repeat? What is the coverage?
Is there coverage of all EU member states? Are all the member states represented?
No. From now, it's not all the EU member states. We have, I don't remember, 5 universities, 5. Evangelos, do you remember the exact number? No. I think it's 5 countries with representatives of universities, but it's based on every local hub, every city of a European city can apply to have a local hub for the PhD hub. So it's also running now, and each university can apply in order to have a local PhD hub.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for whoever sent in that question as well. We are now at the panel point of the day. We've been hosting one of these every single day of the week for the ENDORSE conference, where we have a roundtable discussion led by a moderator expert who will put your questions to our panelists as well. Now, we are going to go to that. It is possibly not what's on that slide at the moment, but in fact, it is data strategy for e-procurement and interoperability, future actions. Now, to lead us through that, we will have Giorgia Lodi from the Istituto di Scienza e Tecnologia della Consione. Do we have you there, Giorgia?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you very much, Giorgia. I'm going to hand over to you. You will be taking the questions from our audience, putting them to your expert panelists. So I'll hand the floor to you to manage the next hour very accomplishedly.
Thank you very much. So thanks a lot for this opportunity to discuss further this topic of the day, that is procurement and the semantic standards in the procurement. Before starting with our panelists of this hour of talk, let me give you an introduction, okay? So before preparing this panel, I was, reading many documents, and well, obviously there is one document, important one, that is the European data strategy, no? And in that document, I saw like a sentence that is very much in line with what we have discussed so far, by the way, in the previous talk as well. That is, the procurement data is essential for improved transparency, accountability of the public sector, and to fight corruption, and also to probably have better quality in the spending of our money, public money, okay? So it's very much important to have data, as has been said before, as a main building block to, construct a better society, and a better, probably, and a more democratic society, because the possibility for citizens to look at the data in a more transparent way is absolutely something that we need to push here. And I can provide an example. In my country at the moment, there is a petition that is open, that is called Data Common Good. There are mostly 50,000 citizens and more than 170 organizations that are asking data for the COVID-19 emergency that we have. And they are asking data that are machine readable, interoperable, and reusable, that are keywords that I heard during this conference. So once again, data should be our main building block to discuss about, and we can definitely understand also, according to the work that has been done at the European level, where we are, which are the main obstacles still that we can see to overcome in order to achieve and to the objectives that we have seen before and that in the previous presentations, and which are the actions for the future to invest on if we really want to succeed in this. So we will discuss that with our panelists. Obviously, feel free from the audience to ask additional questions. I will pose to them. I will start from Isabel. There will be just the first round of discussion, more or less 7 minutes each, and then probably a second round, and then see if the audience has additional questions for you. So Isabel, you have been already presented before from DG Grow, expert in policy making, I would say. I have 3 questions for you, okay? And then I give you the floor for these 7 minutes. My first question is, which are the obstacles, as I said, that you can observe from member states the practices that still do not work very well from the member state that prevent them to achieve the objectives that you previously mentioned. And the second question that I have is, do you think that in the data strategy there is this concept of partnership between public and private sector? Do you think in this specific domain of the procurement we can better exploit this possible partnership between the public and the private sector according to their role, obviously, in the procurement? And the third question is indeed something that comes from an initiative that I launched just a few days ago. The initiative was a question from social networks. Okay, so just my followers in the social network media said to me and asked me some question, and there is one that is, from my point of view, connecting with what you said before in the presentation, because you previously said that there are some important base registers, I would say, like the public contract registries in each member state. The question from this user was how far we are in Europe to have like a federated environment where all these databases are somehow interoperable with each other, so that we can construct on top of that interesting analysis. Isabel, to you.
Okay, thank you, Georgia. I'm going to ask to remind me the two last questions because my memory is not that good.
I will.
So I will address first the first one where you were asking about the current obstacles to put everything in practice in terms of digitalization, having more data, and so on. In my view, and I'm speaking about experience, my previous experience in Portugal as well, working in this field, I would classify these obstacles in three groups. The first one is knowledge. The second one is working in silos, and the third one is mindset. The first one about knowledge, I want to say something that is very important for me, and I think something that is not quite clear within the professionals of public procurement, within the managers, and even decision makers. There's the wrong idea that we have when we have digitization, we have done it. The problem is solved. And a policy for digitization is quite different from a policy for data management. They are different things. Just to say that the purpose of digitization is to optimize the efficiency of a process. The purpose of a data policy is to optimize knowledge. They are different things. We are speaking about different things. I usually make a comparison for my students that these things are for the information systems world as food and pots are for the kitchen. So I would say that data is the equivalent to food, and the IT tools are the equivalent to pots. You use pots to cook food, but they are totally different. So that's why in my presentation some minutes ago, I tried to emphasize this idea that now that we have already a higher level of digitization and we have the production of more data, we can start to think as well, and we have to dedicate specific attention to this field because this is not covered by digital procurement. Managing data is something different from managing IT tools. So this is
That's
about
very true.
knowledge. And I think many countries are a little bit relaxing just when they say, oh, but we have a digital procurement strategy. It's not enough. It's not enough. It's half of the work. About working in silos, what I want to say is, and I've seen this a lot in my professional experience, that when institutions or countries have a problem, they try to develop new solutions to solve this problem. Sometimes the solution is not within using or developing new tools. It's about connecting the existing ones. And this is very common in the public sector because it's very wide and a lot of institutions sometimes they don't speak with each other. And by creating another IT tool, you may be creating another problem. And sometimes this problem can be even bigger than the original problem because let's imagine that we have several systems dealing with the same data. They can appear in different ways and even with different content. We are speaking about the same thing. Just to give you an example, one notice of public procurement that is saved and encoded in different systems can have different values and provide information to the public that and to the users that is not consistent. So working in silos is never good, as we know. The world as it is today obliges us to work together. Is an illusion. We think we don't need to connect. We need to connect with each other. We cannot work alone. So interoperability for me is not so much about technology. Of course, technology is important, is the way we do it. But technology has evolved so much that the problem is still in the fact that people don't realize they cannot develop solutions by themselves. They have to work together, and they are just a piece of the puzzle. For the last one, for mindset, this is something I want to say that for instance, when we speak about transparency in public procurement and having more data of public procurement available, when people speak about transparency, especially at a national level, there's this immediate association with corruption. And I always feel a little bit annoyed with this because this is driving transparency from the negative point of view. And transparency should be associated with two important things, at least from my perspective. First, more competition. More competition creates better services from the public administration. That means all of us can have better hospitals, better schools. So it is really about having a better life for all of us. And the second thing about transparency is also about creating more trust in the public sector. Because if there's nothing wrong with what we are doing, why not be accountable for what we are doing in the field of public procurement? So this is something that I would like, is a change that I would like to see at the level of the member states, especially. I know it's very difficult, and I'm speaking as someone that is part of the problem as well. But I think this is necessary to drive this way, change the behavior of people, and to drive this in a different way would be fundamental for the future of public procurement. And this is the first question. The second one is?
Was the collaboration between public and private to contribute to this digital and data-driven procurement.
Certainly, I think that partnership between public and private is always beneficial. I'm not a big fan of making just because it's beneficial in general. I think this must be driven by needs, specific needs. So it's just we understand very well what are the needs, and because I'm a public servant, from the side of the public buyers, from the side of the contracting authorities, from the side of the public sector, I don't have experience enough to understand what are the needs from the private sector, but I know there are quite a few. And just to give you an example that I think is very interesting that happened during the first months of the pandemic, some portals that were created where you have the information from the suppliers to say, we are here, we can offer these, we have this expertise, these are the service or the products that we have available, And this was very important in a time where the decisions have to be taken in minutes. So if you don't have this and you have to look for where are the suppliers, this can be really tricky. And this is an example where this collaboration could have some applications, for example. So much
Good.
for the second one. And the third one?
The third one was, the third question was how far we are to achieve this federation of these main databases within the member states. So you mentioned the public registries, for example. Do you think that we are very far away, or I don't know, close to achieve like a federation, interoperable environment among these registries in the countries?
I would say no. Frankly speaking, we are much closer than we can all think. And I think the pilot project that Cécile is driving illustrates this. There are two countries that were quite willing in participating in the beginning and do this test to see if this is feasible. And there were no conditions associated, no obligations. They said, we are here, we want to try.
Yeah, indeed.
So it's a matter to convince them or convince the member states or the public authorities that there's nothing to lose. First of all, there's nothing to lose. And on top of this, there might be something to gain. The moment that you understand this, I think there are no reasons for not being part of the federated data space. And
That's very true.
What Cécile is doing and what OP is doing, I think we are very close. Of course, there will be technicalities that will appear in the middle. We are doing something that doesn't exist. This is a project that is totally new in the world. So there will be some hiccups, I'm sure. But if they are at a technical level, we are here to solve them. It's just a matter of time. About the decision to be part of this bigger project, this is just on the side of the member states.
That's very interesting intervention, Isabel. You said many things, and I totally agree with you. By the way, Italy is definitely involved in this BDTI pilot, so I totally agree with you. So let's go ahead. Meantime, I'm checking if there are some questions from the audience. No, not yet. So the next panelist in our list is Carmen Ciciriello. She runs an European company, by the way. She's also working very much with the European Commission, with DG GROW, in the standardization of the procurement. So she's really expert in this field. She's also working in open data, but this is another story that probably with Carmen we will tell you about in the future. But anyway, Carmen, since you are very much involved in important standards in this field of the procurement, I would like to ask you some questions regarding one of them, because it's gaining a lot of attention now in the procurement sector, which is e-forms. It was also mentioned before with some questions for Natalie, by the way. So can you tell us more about e-forms, what it is, the objectives, its role in the Isabel view of the data strategy for the procurement, and probably also the plan. You have a plan for implementation of the member states, and which are the limits that you see that prevent to achieve probably, I don't know, you will tell us this plan. Thanks.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Georgia, for the introduction. I just want to mention that I work with Isabel in the unit B4 on policy and knowledge for business and people and policy. The topic of the forms is considered as a really instrumental, a game changer for the digital transformation of public procurement. The e-forms are a European legislative standard that has been established with the implementing regulation in September 2019. It is a standard used for the publication of public procurement notices in the Tender Electronics Daily, in TED. The use of the e-form standard will be optional as of November 2022 and mandatory as of October 2023. So at the moment, DG GROW is within the EXAC, which is the expert group on electronic procurement, is monitoring the developments in terms of member states' implementation within the e-form subgroup. The e-forms represent a major change because we have, they are a significant improvement to the current standard forms. They are an actual standard and a specific syntax will be used. They represent an improvement in terms of also terminology, definitions, and also new fields such as green, social and innovative procurement. So we have, as a result of the introduction of the forms, two main results, and it is the improvement in quality of data and availability and scope. Okay. Once you have, of course, a good data quality, the resulting analysis, of course, will be much easier and much meaningful. Okay, so for this reason, the forms are considered a game changer in terms of enabling data-driven decision making. And this is not just at the European Commission level, but also at member state level. Because as Isabel mentioned, we have silos. We have silos also in digital procurement, even at the member state level. So there are member states where typically there is a decentralized infrastructure where it is a challenge to have a complete overview of what happens in public procurement, and therefore not be able to make really informed decisions at the policy level. Now, the e-forms are a standard, but it cannot be implemented as is. So it's a standard, and it means two things. We have the legal basis, the implementing regulation. It includes 6 forms, which cover 40 notices. Okay, those notices are composed by fields, like information fields, procedure type, whatever. There are several fields, and there are mandatory and optional fields. So what governments have to do now is to tailor the e-forms, meaning they have to make decisions, for example, on the optional fields and which fields they want to make mandatory, keep optional, or not use at all. If we take strategic procurement, it's a business group, so let's say it's a section of the e-forms, and it includes green, social, and innovative procurement. Those are 3 fields. They are optional, which means that member states do not have to necessarily use them. But if, for example, at a policy level in a member state, green procurement and everything that relates to green procurement is a priority, then they should make it mandatory in order to monitor the weight of green procurement overall in their member states. Another important decision is whether they want to use the same standard, so the e-form standard, also for contracts below the thresholds. Contracts below thresholds represent a significant share of public procurement in Europe, and having the possibility to reuse the same standard for above and below thresholds is quite important. There are other decisions that have to be made, and this is what's currently happening in the majority of the member states. The first step to do this is to gather all the relevant stakeholders around the table, meaning that decisions on the forms are not taken just by the public procurement authorities, just by the CPBs, but meaning central purchasing bodies, but also other ministries and other stakeholders, even from the civil society, should be involved. For example, those for sectoral policies such as environment, transport, defense, etc. So in terms of objectives, at a technical level, as I said, it means better quality and therefore better analysis. For the users and consumers of data, for the businesses, essentially means that they will have better, let's say, tools in terms of data to find opportunities, so finding new opportunities, open up new markets, also for planning, resource planning, because in terms of procurement pipeline, for example, also to find partners for specific tenders, because once you have, these are things that they already do today, but they will be able to do it in a better way because the data quality, the data that they will have, it will be improved, because that is a problem with TED right now. The data is not, let's say, of excellent quality. We all know that. So the e-forms tackle this problem specifically.
Good. Good, Carmen. Well, you are giving, I think, in this panel session, many keywords, and data quality is one of the keywords that I like the most, by the way. Carmen, there is a question coming from the audience, I think, that can be important in relation with e-forms. What initiatives, beside the current ones, the Single Market Scoreboard, in the European Commission promoting launching linked to the e-forms in the field of data analytics? How public procurement data is being used?
Sorry, the question is...
What initiatives, beside the current ones, is the European Commission promoting launching linked to e-forms?
E-forms. Well, the public procurement data strategy, so that Isabel showed you before, and also the pilot that Cécile is leading, the e-forms have a key role in that. Why? Because the e-forms are essentially the data that is published on TED. And so in the data strategy that Isabel showed you, the main data source, is TED. Okay, so TED right now, which basically gathers the information through the standard forms, but in the future will do it through the e-forms. So e-forms represent, let's say, a pillar of, a critical component of the data strategy, because in an initial phase, of course, the current data form, the current standard forms and related data has to be gathered, but then gradually we're moving to the structured format. So the forms are an enabler also for the data strategy, and also what Cécile is working on. They're working, the pilot itself takes into account, and it was designed, the proposal made by Agit for the ISA Square committee,
yes,
was essentially centered around the usage of the e-forms in the future and the ontology.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so what other initiatives? This is, let's say, at the European level. So we have a practical, let's say, application or pilot. We have the design of the architecture with the data strategy. We have at the governance level, we have the e-form subgroup. In terms of national initiatives, so at the national level, there are member states where the e-forms are currently being used as the new format for to build the national contract register. Or national data space. In certain member states, we are moving from contract register to data space. There is this switch in terminology, because contract registers can be like narrow, while data space. So essentially, what we are seeing, and with the implementation, technical implementation of the forms, I expect to see more and more national, let's say, data spaces, procurement data spaces, to start using the e-forms at the national level as the reference format. And that's
great. That's great, Carmen. Very nice to hear these evolutions, and very nice to hear that also at the national level, apart from the change of the terminology, there is an investment in this. So let's move on, otherwise the time is running out. So the next panelist in our panel session is Stephen Graham. He's working for Open People, which is a non-profit association based in Europe. But the association is working a lot also with businesses in order to, enable businesses to also interact electronically with the buyer side of the procurement processes. And I know that Open People is quite active also at the international level. So I want to ask you, Stefan, which are the current solutions that as Open People you are promoting or designing, developing for the business? So there is also this other perspective that we can analyze here in this discussion. And which are the countries outside Europe that are interested in these solutions that are mainly based in Europe, let me say. So which are the countries interested in what Europe can also design and develop with association like yours? Graham.
Okay.
Stephen.
Thank you.
Yeah, here we go.
Audio working okay. So many thanks for the introduction and the opportunity to participate. I'd like to break it into two sections, really. I'd like to talk a bit about PEPL, but I'd also like to talk a little bit about interoperability. So firstly, in regard to PEPL, so it's interesting use of words. So sometimes people will say Open PEPL and sometimes people will say PEPL. And just to explain the difference, Open PEPL is the organisation and PEPL is the specifications and services that are provided. So not quite interchangeable, and I do think it might be better if we just had one word and just avoided any confusion. But anyway, so as an organisation, Open PEPL, we're, as you say, a non-profit, democratic international association, and we have members that come from government agencies, from service providers, and from end users. So quite a broad base. And the role of PEPL really is to enable businesses and governments to integrate business processes, and doing this by standardising the way that the information is structured and exchanged. I think the exchange part is quite important and something I'll return to. So PEPL is the name of the network. It's the name of the specifications that we use to enable business documents to be exchanged. And this covers numerous business documents that are used in e-procurement. So probably the biggest is invoices. Every government that's involved in Open PEPL tends to start with invoices, but also other procurement documents are available, so purchase orders, dispatch advice, so on. We have messages that, reporting messages that go back and forwards between organisations so they know they've got documents, so response messages. So a full suite of purchase documents, but also there are documents that came out of the eSense project, which relate to pre-award procurement processes, so part of the contracting cycle. It's fair to say that there's limited use of that in the network at the moment, but we expect that to pick up as time goes by and that becomes more established. In terms of members, we've got more than 450 organisations, and they cover 39 countries. Right. So quite a broad reach. 15 PEPL authorities. So what we have as PEPL authorities are the organisations, government agencies that drive adoption in their particular country. And most of those are European, of course, mostly in the EU, but we have some that aren't. And we also are beginning to see more countries coming from outside Europe. So we have a PEPL authority in Singapore, we have Australia, we have New Zealand. We're currently in discussion with another 6 countries. And Some of those I can tell you about, and some of those I can't, because it's early days and they want to have confidentiality. But perhaps the biggest of those is Japan. So a very significant development for us with Japan, and they've already announced their intention to use PEPL. They're just going through due diligence at the moment. So provided all that works, then we would hope to see Japan join the network later this year. We have Canada as an observer member, so they are having a look at it, and hopefully they will like what they see and move towards PEPL. I don't know when that, I don't expect that to happen this year, but hopefully next year. So quite a lot of government agencies. We also have more than 300 PEPL certified service providers, and they're in 33 different countries, and many operate across borders. So there will be some that are unique to a country, but also many are cross-border. And so every year we have literally hundreds of thousands of end users, and they send hundreds of millions of messages through this network of PEPL service providers. So it's important to say that PEPL doesn't provide a solution in that sense. We're not a technical provider. The service providers do the exchange of documentation on behalf of end users. But what PEPL does is provide the specifications and the rules and the governance to make all that work. In terms of document types, I mentioned the ones in procurement, but we're also developing logistics messages. We have a big project at the moment called CTC, which stands for Continuous Transaction Controls. And this is to take an extract from an invoice data set and to provide that through to the tax authorities in a country. And around the world, there are different motivations. There's two motivations. One is to improve efficiency in business and tax collection, but the other is to address the tax gap. And this is where VAT is not recovered as much as it should be. And across Europe, about 9% of revenues that should come from VAT don't arrive. So that amounts to something like 140 billion euros a year. So some countries, particularly in South America, they're very focused on addressing this tax gap. Perhaps in Europe, we're more concerned about driving efficiency and making things easier for business. But both of those are valid reasons, and we hope to introduce that later this year and to get take-up. We do a bit of work with the OECD, which gives us access to 54 countries to talk about tax. So we're hoping that that will lead to more and more adoption of these solutions as time goes by. So also I wanted to talk about interoperability. That's probably enough about PEPL. I can talk about it all day if you want me to, but I'm sure you don't. But I would like to talk about interoperability. The European interoperability framework uses 34 big words to define interoperability. So I'm a simple guy. I like to use small words, and I would suggest that 11 words would do it. And I would define interoperability as an output from one system that enables an output from another system. System to system, making things happen. So of course that means exchange. You have to be able to exchange that information across systems, across organisations, potentially across borders. So it's the biggest, second biggest challenge. And the European framework has 4 layers. It has a legal level, and we have that in PEPL, where we sign an agreement with each PEPL authority, which is a government agency, and in turn they sign agreements with service providers, and that provides a legal framework and gives us the ability to provide governance in the network. At the organisational level in the framework, we have policies, and these policies must be met by members. That includes compliance and change management, a whole range of policies. And then at the semantic and technical level, we have the specifications. These specifications enable these documents to be exchanged across organisations and borders. So we have that framework to support interoperability, but for me, the biggest challenge is adoption. And it's, you can have specifications, you can have a network, you can have a framework, you can have legal rules, but you've got to get people to drink the water. You can get the horse to the water, but you've got to make it drink. And I think that's the biggest issue that we see. So we
yeah, indeed, Stefan, and once again, if I interrupt you, is only because the time is running out. But I take into account what you said, because we can ask Patrizia, for example, at the end of this roundtable, the adoption part of the story of the interoperability and of the standards, indeed. But before moving to Patrizia, let's introduce Cécile. You have already seen before in this nice presentation about the BDTI pilot. Cécile works for Digit. She's an expert of European and also international standards in this field, because she's working with also international public bodies. Anyway, Cécile, I have many questions for you. I try to, because I have also a question coming once again from the social network, because I think you are the right person to answer to this question. So you mentioned before the linked data approach. You mentioned the linked open data, so there is also the open world inside that. Okay. So do you believe that semantic web, yesterday in this conference, there was a quote very interesting from my point of view: semantic web improves accountability of the public sector. Do you think that this paradigm, the linked data paradigm, the standard coming from the semantic web, can be really the key enablers for fostering this and promoting this semantic interoperability and the construction of this federated, let me say, data space and data-driven space in procurement? Do you think we need more open data, for example? And the question from the social network was, currently, do you think it is easy I don't know, the systems that are currently available, ask this question: which is the company in all Europe that has the highest number of procurement processes in all the member states, possibly? Okay. So do you think it's easy to answer to this question with what we have now, or probably the BDTI pilot pose some interesting foundations for answering to this question? Thanks, Cécile.
Okay, so maybe I start with the question from the social network. So
yeah.
In fact, if every country in Europe would adhere to the BDTI infrastructure, yes, it would be a simple, and I say simple between quotes, Sparkle query to address the question. But maybe the easiness is the fact that is not yet there, because we don't have all the data available in this infrastructure. But I guess that in a future, so if we think of an implementation where all countries in Europe adhere to the paradigm that will be proposed by the EU public procurement data space, then it will be an easy answer for the question. And I would just see a potential lack of easiness, but I'm sure there are solutions for that, but I don't know them. I cannot tell you this is the solution. But to define a Sparkle query, if you have to type in a Sparkle language, maybe it's not so easy for a citizen, let's say. But I'm sure there are solutions that transform natural language into Sparkle query. So, but this you could answer. Then, yes. yes. So then, so you started with asking whether I believe that going to linked data or linked open data is the solution. Well, for me, it's the best fit at the current state of the art. So why? Linked data means that you have information that is univocally available on the web that has a semantic definition, so it has meaning. It is not data, it is meaningful data that you can access as much as you want. It has a persistency, so I see it with a property of having persistency and meaning, which makes it really good to allow for whatever actor. So we are in let's frame it. We are in a context with a multiplicity of actors from the side of the buyer, from the side of the seller, from the side of the rest, the citizens, universities, whatever. And all these actors, they need to access data. So to come to the point of the developments that are done in people, I think they are, of course, very good. And I contributed a bit to that as well, Stephen. So just to say, I'm not against, but I see these developments as limiting the reach of this procurement data. And in procurement data, most of the data, and I say not all, but most, should be open by default. So in a PEPPOL, what happens is that you have the exchange, bilateral exchanges, and I will be very interested. So, I try to follow the CTC work where the exchange involves also the VAT authorities. So to me, the problem or the limitations provided by bilateral exchanges is that the rest of the world does not know. So if you are only covering, you need this from me and I need this from you, all the aspects that should be exposed, all the information that should be available to all, you need to have a lot of bilateral exchanges to cover that. Then I also believe that in the current situation, the fact that there is cloud-based infrastructures really give a push to these linked open data ideas, because even the systems or the people that are behind the systems that have to exchange information could refer to information that is available on the web and make use of them in their processes. So I see a huge potential that we are not dealing with now. So meaning that for now, we just want to show in the BDTI at least, and then also in the public procurement data space. I don't think it's a question yet to explore the possibilities of accessing openly available information, to refer to it in an exchange of more negotiation, you see. But it could go there, because if you can use some information as master data that is available to all, and then exchange the confidential information in a more secured way or in a bilateral way, then you would be also much better than now when you have to repeat all the context of your transaction in full, you see. So I don't know if I think it's the first question is covered.
Yeah, definitely. But also the question of open data you covered, because what you said, most of the data in the procurement must be open by default. This is the quote of, of the day, I would say. And I definitely agree with you, definitely.
Yes, so in order, just about this, so in the BDTI, I think it's interesting to explain what we face. So we receive open data as input, but then this open data, be it from, there are a bit of differences, but if I'm thinking of the Italian context of the ANAC and not CONSIP, in ANAC, there is a set of open data. But before you uncover the semantics that is behind the CSV file, it's much more complex than having an open data, like in the case of Concip, where it is already accompanied with its semantics, that is the e-procurement ontology semantics.
That's very good, and that's very true. By the way, I'm just pushing this topic since years, and I'm very glad to hear also others saying the same. So once again, Carmen.
May I just one point that I think probably to be shared also with Steve. In terms of, from a technical perspective and say from a policy perspective, we all agree that, we should have open data and that, but if we look at the reality and also if you remember, Steve was leading the most important e-procurement initiative in the UK was Scam for Safety. for the healthcare sector. Steve, do you remember when you were trying to accomplish the full, let's say, strategy and having also information about product prices, for example, to be somehow shared in the, let's say, bigger picture? Can you actually imagine to have that as open data?
Nice question indeed.
Yeah, well, I think commercial price data is not ever going to be open. You just won't get that, whether you want it or not. As a buying organisation, then you can collect data that relates to your expenditure, so you know how much you're spending. And of course, in the government, you can aggregate that. So when I was working in healthcare, we were trying to aggregate data across hundreds of organisations in the healthcare space, which made us a more powerful buyer by having accurate data. But that's that's one organisation really utilising its own data. But if we want to think about a whole community of trading bodies exchanging and making available sensitive commercial data, then I think that's probably unrealistic. So I think you have to divide this between trading activity and analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that Cécile said most of the data, not probably all, and probably this is an example where probably we needed to pay attention indeed. So just the closure of the first round of this discussion, because we are almost at the end of this panel, very interesting, by the way, panel session. Patrizia Cannulli from the Italian Central Purchasing Body. So she is working with real data, real system in a member state, which is Italy, indeed. I know Patrizia because we are working together in some of these projects. So Patrizia, from your data provider also, and from the point of view of an important body like CONSIP in Italy that has to adopt standards. Stefan before was mentioning the adoption of the standards. So what are your point of view on that? So do you see practical obstacles to adopt these standards? We have mentioned them before. And do you think, for example, the European Commission can do something more, provide more tools or something like that to help member states to speed up the adoption of these standards? Thanks, Patrizia. We cannot hear you. Are you on mute or no? Yeah, you are on mute, Patrizia. That's and the bottom line there is mute, unmute.
But I think she is not a co.
No, yes, probably. She cannot. So let's ask the support of the team here. Can you enable the microphone to Patrizia, please? Alicia, are you there? Okay. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Thanks, Patrizia.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this important panel. Yes, I want to say, first of all, that CONSIP has been investing in interoperability and ontology and ontology on procurement for a long time. As in fact, you know several colleagues of mine that works in different working groups. But this afternoon we also have to bring the perspective of the national purchasing body that has to implement the process of procurement. So I think that sometimes the standard is difficult to implement because there is a more focus and attention on business processes instead of standardization. I want to go to an implementation level, concrete level, as with an example. We realize in the e-procurement platform that Consip implement PAs and economic operators meet together and negotiate and manage the procurement process. But this process is more complex sometimes that it can appear. I give you an example. We realized a module to allow PAs to implement an order, and the PAs ask to have the functionality to acquire goods and services and to distribute these in different delivery locations. When we have to transform our module, our orders in XML format, standard format, in order to submit these orders to another system that is related to invoicing, the XML standard do not allow to specify in details these different locations. And so we have to choose between standardization and processes, business processes. It's a simple example, of course, operative one, but you can understand why sometimes business process is more important than standardization. This is also true not only at local level, Italian level, but also at more at European level. I give you another example that we afford during the BDTI pilot. We want to translate our open data into translate using the ontology, e-procurement ontology. And we realized that we can't be, that we do not succeed in translating everything because of details of legislation. For example, we in Italy we can adopt. We can increase the total amount of contract awarded of 20 or even 40%. This possibility it is not doesn't exist in other countries. So we can translate our data model, our process model, exactly in the European ontology for procurement. So these are some examples of that that make the adoption of standardization and ontology immediately and immediate and easy. We have always to trade off to find a trade-off between business and standard.
Yeah, that's indeed true. And probably for your case, the last case that you're mentioning, probably thinking to an Italian application profile as an extension of the European one could be the right way to go, probably, and something to need to be investigated at the national level, indeed. So the last round, very quick last round for all of you, the same question for all of you, and then I saw other two questions from the audience that I would like to pose you. So we have just 4 minutes and we have to be very quick. In a tweet, bullet points, future actions for future investment in this field. Isabel. Oh, we cannot hear you.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. So you want a sentence from my side for future actions too? I lost.
Yeah. Why not? If you have budget, limited budget, okay, limited budget, where do you want to invest as a European Commission, for example?
I think on our side, all the investment that we are doing in the data strategy and in the infrastructure for the data space is already something huge. I would launch the challenge to the member states. And my tweet is work together is much better than work alone. That would be my Twitter.
That's a very nice tweet, indeed. Carmen?
Be ambitious with the implementation of the e-forms. Consider it as an investment.
Okay, e-forms then. Okay, that's great. Stefan?
Yeah, coming back to adoption, really. Sellers always have to deal with the requirements of buyers, and if buyers have different requirements, then it gets very expensive and very inefficient. So you need a common approach. So standards give us that, but we also need a method of exchange. So you don't need to invest money, it's already there. It's called PEPL. Just make a decision to use it.
That's great. Cécile?
Well, check the possible alliances with the object pros framework, or I don't know what, and then further invest in skills, in semantic skills in Europe.
That's very interesting. Semantic skills. Patrizia?
I would say a simplification of process before digitalization. And open data, that's my personal.
I think that process.
Open data, as Isabel said, not only for transparency and anti-corruption, but also for participation and improvement.
That's great. I don't know if we have the last minute for the last question that I see in the chat, like how public procurement data is being used for evidence-based decision-making. That's interesting. Isabel, probably you are the right person to tell us. How do you use it for decision-making, evidence-based decision-making?
I think you already launched this question to Carmen, no?
No, it was related to e-forms, the one from Carmen, but
Okay.
this is general, I think.
Okay. I think we use it in many ways. We are paying a lot of attention to the data and establishing a few indicators internally, also to understand what can be the future policy and the future legal framework for public procurement. I think this requires some time. We cannot change the law constantly, but for instance, one of the indicators that we have in the scoreboard is, I would say, not looking so nice currently, is about the single bids is increasing in the last years. And this is looking at data and think what can we do in the future update of the legal framework to prevent this to happen and if the solutions are coming from the legal side or not. Because as I mentioned before, there are a few things that can have a legal coverage, that others that can have soft, what we call soft policy, that is trying to do recommendations to the member states and to see if we can drive them in a way that is not, I would say, a mandatory way. But this is being done. We are looking at indicators coming from the information from TED to see what are the changes that we should foresee in the future legal framework.
That's very interesting. I thank you all for this very interesting panel session. I think we discussed many things. We touched many topics that are very, very important in general for data management, but also for the procurement domain. So,
thank you very much, Georgia. Great job. Thank you for all of that and for the great overview and managing all those questions as well. We're going to take a short break now, so 5 minutes to allow you to maybe go and grab a coffee or stretch your legs, and we will be back with our final hour of presentations. Welcome back. We are into our final hour of day 3 of the ENDORSE conference, the European Data Conference on Reference Data and Semantics. And today our watchword is procurement. Interoperability is the theme for the whole event, of course, but we are talking about today specifically about procurement. Now, I want to remind you, please do keep sharing your thoughts and your comments. Use the hashtag ENDORSE2021 on Twitter or on social media, and use the chat function to ask your questions of our speakers. I know there's been great engagement, so we would like you to keep doing that. And also, we have got a survey for you to take. That's over on Slido. You can get there by going to slido.com and putting in the code ENDORSE2021. You'll find that survey under the polls section. It's to get your feedback, to feedback into our event. And we will, of course, be having different tracks, and these are all recorded, so you can come back after the event and find out more. But with that, let me turn to our speaker, who's going to tell us about tables and contents and indexes, titled In Search of Knowledge, Miral Alakos. Miral, we can see you, but we can't hear you. Can we try again, Miral? Can you say hello? Oh, no. I think you might be still on mute somewhere on your screen. No, he's still muted. I'm told by the tech team that I think it's at your end rather than at ours. I know it's a challenge, especially after a long day. I lose count of the number of times I'm saying you're on mute. But can you find a button? Do we have any advice?
So, Meryl, I'm sharing your presentation. The button is on the bottom of your screen. You have to click on it. And I'm also sending you requests to unmute yourself. So at the bottom of your screen, you have the microphone. Click on that.
No.
We cannot hear you. You're still muted.
Sorry about that, Miral. Our tech team here, Alicia, and the background team are all doing their best to try and get this working, but I think you have to switch something at your end. me just check. Do we already have our next speaker connected and we swap the order? Perhaps that would be a solution if we are plagued by technical problems. Unfortunately, this is the COVID-19 world we're living in, where we try to get everybody on timely fashion, but it doesn't always work, and the tech does sometimes let us down. Our next speaker is Marina Cuerto from the Senate of Spain. Marina, do we have you there?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Wonderful.
Okay.
Our previous speaker was having a terrible time.
Do you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Okay, well, Marina, you tell us about challenges to promote interoperability in a bicameral parliament, the example of Cortes Generales. We're really interested to hear your experience.
Yes, a minute. I'm going to share.
Oh, great. Thank you so much.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Looks good. We appreciate you jumping in early. Thank you so much. Over to you.
So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you to the organization for inviting me to this superb conference. I must say it the first time. It has been very, very interesting, all the tracks. I'm an archivist in the Spanish Parliament since year 2000. I work in the Directorate of Technical Parliamentary Assistance in the Senate. As you see, we are a bicameral parliament. I work in the Senate to assist the plenary, the bureau, and the board of spokespersons, that are the three most important organs. We deal with the activities, the internal activities of the Camera. And since 2014, I'm the chief of document for the new department that was created in this year, which was created to coordinate a comprehensive management of parliamentary documents. So the documents created by the Camera and the senators and the internal documents. And we have also activities in the field of vocabularies, singularly in the Eurovoc and the Eurovoc and other taxonomies or other vocabularies developed by the Camera to improve in the parliamentary knowledge. And we are beginning just now to work with draft techniques to work with documents for the web and especially for the semantic web. So let me show you. We have the bicameral parliament. Spanish parliament is called Cortes Generales. It is a very historic name to designate the two cameras. And this is the screen. It has a website, as you see. And as you see, it is a very, very not very active website. We have the two historic buildings of the Congress of Deputies and the Senate, and just the Article 66 of the Constitution, of the 1978 Constitution, which is the definition of the Parliament as a representative organ of the citizens. And this is, it's not a very big, not a very image, but it is the new website of the Congress of Deputies. The first thing, we have a virtual visit. And this one it is the homepage of the Senate of Spain. As you see, the Senate Spain has in the homepage all the several social networks and a lot of information and very actualized the meetings and so on. I will repeat this thing. So if we consider interoperability on the web, the Spanish Parliament as an object is not very developed. And why? I have cited some things that I have to speak about. Despite this, the traditional procedural background is very strong. It means that the Parliament, you know that our actual period began after the dictatorship, the Franco dictatorship, and the civil war. We began in 1978 and it was a very strong phase where we saw a lot from foreign states, Germany and France, and we developed a very strong legal. That will be very interesting for the drafting documents because the documents haven't changed in all this period of 40 years. But one thing, we work on technical synergies like 30 years ago. So we developed 30 years ago a lot of working procedures, including the Eurovoc thesaurus. We were one of the first parliaments in the 80s to work with the European Parliament in the Eurovoc development. Now the transparency is the new paradigm, but I think there are sometimes we can arrange it with to put in all the documents, all the videos, all the sessions on the website, and with XML. XML documents, and that's it. And it's not enough because the semantic web uses XML, but in a very strong development. We have also the idea of a collaborative work inside and outside, very, very, not very high. In other or in two cameras, people working there are very used to work in a very little group, and they don't even imagine to work with other parliaments, nor even the outside. So it's very, very difficult. And in this period, the actual period where the best thing is to collaborate, the best thing is to take from outside what people has built for them. And scattered electronic systems and services and duplication of tasks, these are two things that are very, that don't improve or to get other new tasks, singularly in the team of the vocabularies or the drafting work. So here it is the organigram. That's where I work. And it is important this because I work in a very, very parliamentary directorate, direction, and my colleagues, the other colleagues, archivists, worked in the Directorate of Documentation, which there is the library of the Senate, and the archives, the central archives of the Senate, the Directorate of Studies. And we are 13 archivists in the Senate. And we spend a lot of times working with the new website. I show you there. I think it will be. Yes, you are going to have a very, very rapid look to this search. If you see in the slide, it's the English version, but a lot of things are in Spanish. The search is there, and we have a thematic search. If you put in this, we have. I will speak about it. Some great thematics. These are 21 thematics, which englobes all the documents of our institution, including the parliamentary collections and the parliamentary, the initiatives, senators, official publications, and the other collections, which are the historical archives from the 19th century, all the documents, and the bibliographic resources, which, if you see, I'm sorry, we are not, we don't have it in English, but what very type of kinds of documents external from other institutions. And the three other facets, if you see, are the blocks, the thematic areas, there are subdivisions from the blocks, and there in terms Tesauro Senado, we have the specific terms of our thesaurus. It means that we have other parliaments that they have a very thematic, they classified the documents in thematics. I'm remembering l'Assemblée nationale or the House of Commons, but normally it is parliamentary documents. We insist here in the Spanish Senate to englobe and to have all the documents indexed. And we'll see why it is very important. But if you see, these are terms. And here it's very, very important here to see how in the past we work, and we still work in our institution, and how we must work today. From a lexical conception before web, we have to think about concepts. The basis relational database, and we have choose VocVeg platform. We will see this. The actualization. 20 years ago, the Eurovoc wasn't very actualized. It takes the actualization 2 or 3 years. Now Eurovoc is actualized it is a very strong actualization. We still index manually. We don't have yet the functions of indexing automized. And one thing very important is the geographical information is still considered as a descriptor at the same time as a concept. And in the semantic web, we have another things to work in it. And in the past, the use was strictly inside the institution. And now we have the opportunity to map with other vocabularies. So this is a resume of what we intend to improve with our special vocabulary. Besides the Senate and Congress of Deputies, the two cameras in the origins, when they began to work closely to European Parliament, they work in the same way. They work, but the evolution was very different. In the Senate, as I see the thematics. We search this, and 1.5 years ago, we initiate a cooperation with the Office of Publications to migrate disorders of the Senate to something else, something in SCOS and using VocVeng.
So, Marina, there is a question for you. We've got coming in from the chat. Has Eurovoc fulfilled all your needs, or was there any need to add Spain-specific concepts?
No, we have the Eurovoc concepts, the geographical concepts, or the terms, geographical terms, but because the senators use them a lot with to ask questions for the circumscription or something else. And we have a list of a complementary list which added to this structure, which the basis is the Eurovoc. I don't know if I have answered the question.
I think you've given us a great insight into your experiences, actually, and I'm sure that has answered the question. And thank you so much for joining us a little bit earlier than scheduled, and thank you very much for your presentation. Are we able to, yes, there we go. Miral, are you able to hear us and see us, and can we see and hear you? No, we still can't hear you. Can you unmute? I thought we had rectified the problem. Unfortunately, we don't seem to have.
Okay, Meryl, you are talking now. It's perfect. Try to talk. Your microphone is open.
Is that okay now? Can you hear?
Yes, fantastic.
Okay. So now in my presentation today, I will try to explain that approaching new information and knowledge will be mainly through using words, not classification numbers. Can we go on to the other? Hi. Okay, until 900, human knowledge doubled approximately every century. And by the end of World War II, knowledge was doubling every 25 years. And as it is now, it is doubling almost every 13 months. And it's assumed that in the near future, with all the internet coming in, it will be every 12 hours, knowledge will be doubling. So can we go on to the... Here in my presentation, I endeavor to explore the uses of two traditional tools that are made available to us by the publishing world. These will be the table of contents and also the book index. I will mainly concentrate on the book here. Defined in the Webster's Dictionary, knowledge is the act of understanding what has been learned through education and also putting facts and experiences together. Information implies facts and data on a special subject of study. Management of information or knowledge starts with the organization of content or putting together a well-designed, comprehensive, organized manner. Information is really, to me, is content management, and it's called knowledge management systems, which is KOUS. After all, they're the contents list and the index, both made available. Sources of knowledge and information are included in books, journals, thesis documents, and so on, as we all know. But now there is a versatile forms and formats of materials. It's not the print book anymore. It's non-print or online, where information and knowledge are recorded. And this endeavor for search of information will be going on and will continue to be so into the future. Okay. This has been accessing information and knowledge has been a problem throughout several hundreds of years, from the times of Callimachus, we know, in the Alexandria Library in 260, between 260 and 40. He classified books according to their subjects, which was a big step forward. If we go back to the times of King Wen in China, that's BC 1150, he designed for his book an index and contents table, which is again something really amazing. In our times, we have now different sources, different formats, and people with different interests and under different circumstances. And therefore, we will have to think of different systems for managing knowledge and information. Okay? First, we take the book, and the title page of the book, which is in the very front, is really an identity of the book. It gives the names of the author or authors, editor, the title, the series, publisher, and so on. So it gives us a complete information on the book itself. But the page, title page by itself, is not enough to evaluate the content of the book. We just know what it is. Okay. Next. Okay. Now, for searching what it is, the content of the book, there are two tools, as I have mentioned. Because people, when they see the book, the bibliography of the book, and find out who has written it and so on, they want to go to the shelves, find the book, and look inside and go through the contents and the index. This study, made in 1990, showed us that almost all users wanted to see the content and the index of the book before they decided whether the book was useful for them or not. And the table of contents, really, if you look at them carefully, you will see that each chapter has a heading, and then you have subtopics under it. So it's like a hierarchical taxonomy. It reminds us as taxonomies, but the index is listed in an alphabetical order. Okay. Indexes are defined according to their functions. In most books, you find one straight alphabetical index, which includes both the topics, keywords, and the names that are mentioned in the book. However, there are also indexes according to their functions in different types of books. You might have geographic indexes, name indexes, legal case indexes, scientific numeric indexes, and so on. So it's according to the content of the book. You might have different types of indexes. In an index, in a book index, the keywords and names are taken from the content exactly as they are represented by the author on the pages. If necessary, if the topic or the name is mentioned in different pages of the book, it's always a good idea to write down all the page numbers so the user can go from one part to the other, knowing exactly where the name or the topic is mentioned. Okay. Table of contents help retrieving similar books through using the same chapters, the same titles and keywords. Table of contents is a list of the chapters, so it makes us, the user, to go to a specific subsection. It allows readers to go directly to the section. However, where an index is used in an alphabetically arranged index, you go from the page where the topic is mentioned to another page, maybe it is mentioned again. So actually, the arrangement of entries are not following the same content pages as it is in the table of contents. It reverses the material of the index document. Okay. Now, another important advantage of table of contents and the book indexes will be using content topic terms for our searches. For example, usually for a book or a document, you get subject terms from a thesaurus or from subject headings list, like Library of Congress subject headings. However, if you take the contents pages and the index terms and use them as searching, available for searching, that will make it, it will give a wider prospect to the user, and therefore they will be able to search the content not under only a few subject headings, but under several topics that are taken from the table of contents and the indexes. Okay. When we have online material, we download it. Usually we can see, I mean, almost all the time, we can go to the contents pages and the index and then decide whether we want this book or not, whether we want to read the full thing or not, because the table of contents and the index will be available to the user. For printed books, though, the table of contents and the index, you just have to go and find the book and look inside it. However, if these two tools are attached to the bibliography, in the first place, when you check the information, author or title information, and find the bibliography, then you will be able to see the complete table of contents page and the index page, which will give you an idea. Now that books are not classified and put on the shelves, and you cannot go and see the book itself, it will be a great idea to add these two tools attached to the bibliography. Okay.
Miral, I think we're going to have to ask you to wrap up as quickly as you can because we've lost quite a bit of time with our technical faults and we have a few more speakers to get finished before we wrap up today.
Okay. Well, we can maybe go to the... Okay. So here, actually, what I want to say is that in big libraries now, they are trying to save space and put the books in bins and just take them up to the 5th level or 10th level. So how is the user going to go and see? There's no classification. Therefore, there is another technology as a solution. It's called, if you take me to this next page, please. And the next one. This will be another solution. You want to give the information you get from the title page and the index you find attached to the bibliography. And automation will help us physically by finding the printed books through ASRS system, which is being used now in 3 different libraries in Canada, United States, and Europe, automated storage and retrieval systems. So you want an exact book and they'll bring it to you, but you're not going to have a chance to see its table of contents or the index. You have to see it beforehand.
Okay, I think we'll have to wrap it up and leave it there, but thank you very much for that. Okay. I'm sorry about the struggles with technology, but we will move on now to our next speakers who will be telling us about Europeana, the reference of European digital cultural heritage. And to do that, we have Caterina Mutogiani and Fulgencio San Martin from the European Commission.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you for having us. Caterina is not here, so I will be presenting this alone. And so my name is Fulgencio San Martin. I work in the Commission in the Unit of Interactive Technologies, Digital for Culture and Education, together with my colleague Caterina Mutogiani. And we also work particularly in the sector of Europeana, which is the reference for the digital European cultural heritage. So this is a sector this is a sector with a number of challenges as we're speaking. So there are a lot of threats that are not directly, as we know, directly related to the coronavirus. But you might remember a couple of years ago that there was this big fire in the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Actually, it seems like 20 years ago, right? But it was around 2 years ago. And there are some natural threats, and not only natural, but also man threats that are affecting the cultural heritage of the European Union. And they cannot be protected in the usual ways, you know, with barriers like Venice floods or with other means. So one way of protecting them is by creating what we call digital twins. So by creating digital models of the originals, we can manipulate them, we can interact with them, we can see how they might respond to new treatments, etc. So that is what this unit is trying to do. For example, helping museums to offer their objects and their visits, their virtual visits, with virtual reality, augmented reality, and other technologies. We are talking about a sector which handles 40% of European Union tourism. And if I remember well, it goes even to 95% of all European Union citizens' travels. 95% of those travels include some kind of tourism. So it is a fairly important part of our culture. So the instruments that we have are mainly the recommendation that the Commission made to the member states back in 2011, and that is going to be updated this year. So that will actually, it's a piece of legislation that is very interesting to read because it includes a lot of practical things, practical steps that can be implemented, that can be done not only by the member states, but also by the cultural heritage institutions. So the main tools that we will be using in order to implement that recommendation on our side, from the Commission side, are the funding tools, which are the Horizon Europe and the Digital Europe program that are starting right now, so this spring, for a period, I believe, is for 7 years. And one of the main tools that we will be using is obviously the Europeana initiative. Now, you might know Europeana as a website that had some problems about searching because it's difficult. It was difficult to find things. But I must say that from a couple of years, in the last couple of years that I've been working in the Commission, I've used only Europeana's images in my presentations, and actually it works quite well. So in case you don't find something, just ask. We are very nice people, and we will be sure to help you. So Europeana is not only a website, it's also an initiative. It's a whole initiative. It has a lot of things and a lot of people behind, and not only people working directly in the website, but in many more levels of it. So the website is the place that we use not only to put in forefront the objects of the museums and the galleries, etc., in Europe, but also to implement, when needed, the policies of the Commission. So you might remember, for example, last summer, that the Commission, at the request of the member states, rightfully so, after the long confinement, you might remember the long confinement of last spring, they wanted to reopen Europe. There is still this website which is informing where you can travel to. So the reopen Europe. And they started this campaign, which was called Discover Europe. So the Europeana website mimicked that. So we showed a number of places, hidden gems, new places that you are close to you, but you might not know about that. So Europeana is getting right at the side of the Commission in order to implement those policies. For example, this is the month, it was a week ago, of the Women's Day. And actually, the Europeana is implementing not a Women's Day, but a Women's Month. It should be the whole year, but still, it is a very interesting initiative. I invite you to come to it. And actually, there is, for example, a very interesting initiative inside of it, which is the 14 women in email course. So you can register for this email course, and during 14 days, you will receive an email with a women who was very important in the culture of the European Union in the past. As I said, Europeana is not only the website. Mainly, so it starts also with us, with the European Commission, but it is also on the other side. There is this network, what we call the Europeana Network Association, of over 4,000 museums, galleries, archives, libraries, who are willing to put all their objects on all their knowledge, which is in danger, as I explained, to put it all together in a single place and with a single structure. So what we did was this is not an easy task, and this is the key of my presentation. So at a certain moment, around 12 to 15 years ago, the member states charged the Commission, and the Commission did this starting project of Europeana, of putting all the objects, the digital objects, the digitized objects from the 4,000 museums. At the time it was less, there were less, to put it all together. And that is not an easy task, because you must make all of them work within a single structure. And it is not the same, a small museum from here, from Spain, or from Finland, or from Malta, to work at the same level than the Rijks Museum in the Netherlands, which is a huge museum and has not one person, but a whole team of IT people who can develop the metadata that are defined in their masterworks. So all together, both the cultural heritage institutions and us, and also this, we created from the Commission, we created first a grant and then the procurement, a call for tender, to charge a consortium that is called the Europeana Foundation, and to be as a proxy and to be in charge of this task, to aggregate all the data from these institutions. And that was done, in my opinion, very, very successfully. We gathered we all gathered around 52 million digital objects. And nowadays, that is a leap into the future. So until today, nowadays we have over 39 aggregators. Actually, I think it's already 40 aggregators that act as proxy, in order to validate and to help also the cultural heritage institutions to get their data into Europeana. One particular thing that you must know about Europeana is that it is not a repository. Europeana is an aggregator. So it includes links to the objects that reside and still are in the repositories of every museum, of every institution. So, as it happens, Europeana nowadays, it has the strategic focus and priorities that align with the focus, with the strategy of the European Commission. So last year, the President, Ms. von der Leyen, explained in the State of the Union what was the digital decade that was coming in the 2020s. The digital decade had and has mainly three priorities. The main one is infrastructure, then there is the data and the cloud, and then there is the artificial intelligence. And actually, Europeana is mimicking those priorities. So the first is infrastructure. There is no way that we can have proper data, proper artificial intelligence without a proper infrastructure. About the data and the artificial intelligence, Ms. von der Leyen said one thing that was very interesting. We have around an 80% of data, a huge amount of data, but an 80% of it is never used. And that is a consequence of the quality. So we store data just because we have to store the data. But there is no measure of its quality. There is hardly any measure of its interoperability. And that is one of the things that we want to build here in Europeana. How are we measuring the interoperability and the quality of the data? Well, I will come back to that. But one main thing that you have to keep in mind is that you cannot do that. And the Digital Decade objectives were published just 2 or 3 days ago. I invite you also to read it because it is a very interesting document and also very easy to follow. But the main thing that you will read through it is that the Digital Decade is about building capacity and building the capacity of the cultural heritage workers, the people who must provide this data.
Can we get to wrapping it up now because we are really quite far behind time? If you could sum it up in a slide or so.
2 minutes?
2 minutes, no more.
Okay. So I will not explain the data modeling because it was already explained on Monday by Antoine Isaac. He is from the Europeana Foundation. And you can see how the ontology, so the Europeana data model, but the main thing that I want you to understand is that this Europeana, this ontology was created based on the structure of 4,000 different museums all over Europe. So how do you measure interoperability and quality of the data? So in my opinion, it was done in a very clever way for Europeana because it was done not in a very technical way, but from the point of view of the users. As I said, we are building capability, we are building their capacity. So we want the content, for example, the content quality tiers, we want them to be very well understood by anyone. And so the definitions are here on the left side, and then they are translated into the proper right statements and the technical ways to understand those quality measures. Same for metadata. And there it is, that is my closing slide. So on the one side, you can have the interoperability measured in the use of the APIs, but also in the ways that you allow the content to be reused depending on the licensing. So if it is standardized or not, that is also present here in the metadata and in the content, you will see in the rights statements.
Okay, thank you so much, Fulgencio. I appreciate it. And thank you, Europeana, a lifeline to many of us during the lockdown as well. Absolutely wonderful. Final speaker today, we're squeezing her in right before the deadline, Lydia Pincher from Wikimedia, telling us why Wikidata as a central hub in the linked open data web is a good idea.
Yes, thank you so much today. Can you see my presentation?
We can't yet, but we're seeing something trying to connect. There we go. Yes.
All right. Great. So thanks again so much for inviting me to talk about Wikidata. My name is Lydia Pincher, and I'm the product manager of Wikidata. I'm here today to talk about Wikidata, which is a project that's very close to my heart. In this talk, I want to focus a bit on the fact that Wikidata is becoming more and more of a central hub in the linked open data web. In your work, have you ever had to connect concepts in different databases to each other? For example, to know that 58274 in OpenStreetMap is referring to the same entity as 4008460-7 in the German National Library. Both of those are referring to Brussels, by the way. Or in your work, do you need to find additional information for a given topic based on an ID, like the cultural heritage designation for a building based on its Inspire ID? The possibilities are endless. And with Wikidata, we are here to help you make that happen. Wikidata is a free and open knowledge base. It's a sister project of Wikipedia. Wikidata covers general purpose data about all kinds of entities in the world. So for example, you could find the date of birth of a famous actor, or the architect of a famous building, or the number of inhabitants of a city you're interested in. Wikidata is also a multilingual project. The data is stored in a language agnostic way and then presented to you in your preferred language. All of the data Wikidata has is free for you to use and anyone else, and free to contribute to. So, but what does this look like in practice? What you can see here is a screenshot from the entry in Wikidata about the European Agency for Fundamental Rights. You can see names for that institution in various languages, as well as a few statements about that entity, like that it's an agency, that it was founded in 2007, for example. But today, I want to focus on an often overlooked part of Wikidata, which is the identifiers section. So for example, here you can see the entry for this institution in the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the German National Library, the Library of Congress, or if that floats more your boat, Eurovoc, Facebook, Freebase, or even Instagram, wherever there is an entry for the institution. All of this data and these connections to all the databases and catalogs are collected and curated by over 25,000 editors who care passionately about data. Together, we collect and maintain this data to power Wikipedia, the other Wikimedia projects like Wikimedia Commons, the Media Archive, or Wikivoyage, the travel guide, as well as projects outside the Wikimedia movement. So for example, today, if you ask your personal digital assistant on your phone a typical general knowledge question, then it's not like that the answer is actually coming from Wikidata. Today, we have connections in Wikidata to about 5,700 different catalogs, databases, and websites that you can make use of. These span many different domains: movies and TV, archaeology, sports, journals, arts, you name it. As of today, we have about 164 million of those connections. So entries on Wikidata that connect to another catalog, database, or website. To name just a few popular ones, there's Library of Congress, there's the Internet Movie Database, there's OpenStreetMap, there's JSTOR, there's the Google Knowledge Graph, BBC, Twitter, and so many more. Now, let's look at two great examples of what others are already doing with Wikidata's external identifiers. The first one I want to focus on is Quora. Quora is a question answering site where you can ask questions about a vast number of topics. Quora has a topic ontology, so they can, for example, serve questions about cats to people who said they would be willing to answer questions about pets. Their internal ontology was very messy and they wanted to improve it. So what they did was use Wikidata's external identifiers that link to Quora's topics and find the right entities in Wikidata for each of their topics. And then they compared their own internal ontology with Wikidata's ontology and tried to align it and find mismatches. And in the process of all of that, they improved both their own ontology and fixed mistakes and missing relations in Wikidata's ontology, so that everyone at the end of the day benefited from that. The second example I want to show you is a browser extension called Entity Explosion. It surfaces additional information you need as you browse the web. So imagine, for example, you're on the Twitter account for the European Commission. Then Entity Explosion can check Wikidata for additional data about that topic and show you a little pop-up that you see here in the screenshot, so you can learn more about the European Commission at a glance. But on top of that, the even more useful part is that Entity Explosion asks Wikidata for all the other places in the web that it knows has this entity. So with one click, you can jump, for example, to Guardian's topic page about the European Union, to the Finnish National Bibliography, or you can jump over to Giphy to find the latest European Union's hot GIFs and dance to them. The web has lost a bit of its vital connections over the last years and pushed it into a few big silos. And I believe that Entity Explosion is one great way to surface those connections again and make more information accessible. I hope I could give you a glimpse into Wikidata and why it's a great hub in the linked open data web. And maybe some of you were even inspired to think about new ways to make use of that data in your own projects. If you do, I would love to hear about them and discuss more about them with you. You can reach me via email or Twitter. I'm happy to discuss those more with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lydia. That was super interesting. I really was fascinated by that. Thank you. So that's it for today. I think it's been a packed schedule. We've got a lot of great talks. Of course, the ENDORSE conference will continue. Tomorrow will be our final day, and the theme for tomorrow is linking data spaces. Today, we've heard about data quality in the procurement process, how to make linked data more reusable. We learned about the eProcurement BDTI pilot, as well as AI uses and the need to keep the underlying infrastructure green. So tomorrow, we're going to be also talking about linking data, and we're going to have a keynote on linked data and the EU digital sovereignty, something that's topping the headlines at the moment. So please do go to Slido, fill in the survey. We want your feedback, and have a really great evening. We'll see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock.